Okay, so I began recording, and again, just as a reminder, we'll look at some folks. We'll give some quick feedback if you want it, and then what I want to do is I want to open up Revit, and I have this silly thing. I was looking at modularity and repetition or something, right? Just sort of coming up with something pretty strange. I don't know, whatever. But I was going to use this as the basis. I could, first of all, we'll talk about grids and the sort of overall interface in Revit. We can talk about establishing our grid ordering system, both in plan and in elevation section. And then we can also bring in Rhino geometry quite easily into Revit to use either to begin to assign as walls and roof and floors, or to use as rigs to then model our own stuff, new stuff in Revit. So again, there's more than one way to sort of do these things, but I just want to sort of get you immersed in all of the different softwares. And again, we can go back and forth between Rhino and Revit. It's not too shabby of a process. All right, so let's see here. What am I thinking? Right. Anna, one quick thing I noticed when you had yours up, a few of the silhouette trees I gave you look like they might be kind of skewed, or they have like a sort of shadow being cast. I recommend maybe going through and just quickly auditing your drawings, maybe getting rid of some of the funky looking plants and maybe adding a few more, and or just getting rid of the ones that aren't quite, they look like they're skewed, or that they're casting a shadow, but the others aren't casting a shadow. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask maybe towards the end of today. But after that, I think you're ready to just submit them via Canvas, okay?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I will.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. All right, so I'm in Rhino, and let's just go ahead and move on to let's move on to a quick demonstration. So if anybody wants to work ahead, especially in our day off tomorrow, they can. If you want to sort of get your hands dirty with a little bit of Revit, I totally understand that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly, I wasn't done quite yet, like sort of composing these things, but you can see I took some artistic liberty, sort of making some modules with some of my components and then repeating that module, rather than trying to make a bunch of new things with some of the other stuff that I hadn't used. So again, you can take as much artistic license as you'd like. Just as a reminder, what I found is just it's really kind of fun and actually pretty, uh, um, wait, did I just copy that somewhere randomly? Sorry, I'm trying to do two things at once. It's not really working. My brain is having a hiccup here. What I found is that design is a lot easier when you give people constraints, right? And so you have a certain design space to work within. If you have no absolutely complete freedom and absolutely no constraints, it's actually really hard to sort of figure out where do you start and where do you begin and how do you get inspiration, right? So in Studio, we're working within a site. I've given some site constraints, and there was also a sort of procedural set of steps to sort of follow when it came to um, uh, doing this assignment and creating these sort of planes in different places. I'm just going to quickly move this into place, and as a quick refresher, let's see here. I'm just going to move this. I'm just going to snap this. I don't know why I'm making this so cumbersome for myself. Just snap it over here. Then I'll just move it, use my gumball tools, move it this way. Not being overly precise here, for better or worse. Let me just blow this up, and I can live with that. Now, did I actually move that rather than copying it? I think I did. Oy. Copy. Let me redo this really quickly. All right, so you can see even somebody who's using CAD software for 20 plus years sometimes make these really goofy mistakes. And I'll slide it this way. Why not? I don't know, kind of weird, but whatever. Anyway, I have a few circulation corridors moving, spines moving in the east-west direction, and deployed along those a set of spatial modules And I even have a couple of planes that connect as light scoops. If, let's say, I'm looking down from the south, then these things can actually bounce some light down in from the top and side or something like that. I don't know. Because otherwise I'm sort of have a nice opaque south face for each of these rooms. And then I have a completely open west face, which would be unideal for those hot desert afternoons, but I can only do so much in a quick amount of time. I'm gonna go ahead and save this. And I'm just saving it as a Rhino file. I'm gonna go ahead and close Rhino, but keep in mind that I will have I will be bringing this Rhino file back into Revit here in a bit. Rhino is asking me if I'm going to update. I do not want to run updates right now, Revit or Rhino. And I'm opening up Revit. Okay, Revit 2024. Again, if you go to Autodesk and you go to the educational suite or learning educational community, as long as you have a .edu address, you should be able to create an account and then go through their suite of products, and most of them, if not all of them, you can download and use free for 12 months. Every 12 months, you just update your account. If you still have a valid .edu address, then you can update your account and still use it for free as a student. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so Revit, again, it only runs in Windows. And you can see this was, let's see, this says it's Revit 2024. And I'm just going to say over here on the left, it says I have a menu. Of course, I can just go to File and do the same thing, but I can say Open or New. When I say New, I want to make a new project. I'm going to leave it as Imperial. Mine doesn't have architecture. It just has multidiscipline. If yours actually has a variety of options and one of them is architecture, you can pick architecture. But I'm going to pick Imperial units because we're in the United States and we're the oddball anomaly. We don't use metric here for some reason. Create new project. I want to make sure I say project, not project template. I'm going to hit OK, right? So a lot of these were by default, but I just want to go through these and say you can always look at these options and double check and make sure, particularly if your options don't look exactly like mine. Sometimes that happens. All right, now take a moment, just look, all right? What you'll see is that there are a bunch of tabs. Under each of these tabs, there's a bunch of tools along the top. Then we have a set of boxes over here. One box says properties. Another box says views and project browser. And then finally, we have what looks like a sort of CAD interface over here, a window where we start to see, in this case, what looks like a sheet with a scale, graphic scale, a north arrow, and a couple of graphic conventions like a section cut and a couple of elevation tags. Okay. So what's interesting about this software is it's been specifically developed for the building industry and architects and engineers, as opposed to Rhino, which is more of a geometric modeler that can be applied to a wide range of design, but sometimes really really annoyingly doesn't sort of cater specifically to architecture. All right, so what you'll see is that instead of having like surfaces and curves and things like that up along here, if you go to the architecture tab, we have things like walls, doors, windows, components, columns, roof, ceilings, floors, different types of wall systems like curtain walls, and we'll talk about those later on. Railings, ramps, and stairs, etc. Right? But what I want to do is I want to show you guys, right? Like just quickly, right? We have a few tabs that we'll talk about. One is architecture. One I think is insert. And let's see. We won't really be talking about massing and site at the moment, but there are tools for bringing in some AutoCAD or Rhino topo and then converting that automatically into site topo and things like that. So anyway, architecture, what we'll be dealing with primarily is component, and then maybe on Thursday we'll start talking about walls and things like that, but components and then grid. We'll start to get things set up and we'll start to bring in our Rhino model on top of that, okay? So right now, first of all, when I go to my CAD view, it has a label and it says L1 architectural, right? And that means that we're looking at level 1 architecture floor plan. Okay. So we're looking from above. And you can see that we have several options automatically. We have a level 2 architectural floor plan, even though we haven't really set where that level 2 actually starts or where level 1 stops. We have something called a site plan. We can double click through here and begin to toggle. You can see that each of these are different views of the same model. So as we model something in, let's say, level 1, we can go to site, and level 2, and we can see all the changes and updates as we go, right? These are just different viewports of the same model. Same with our sections. And if I drill down, you can even see that we'll have elevations. In other words, looking orthographically from the side, from the east, north, south, and west. Right? And then we even have a 3D view. By default, I think we have a cover sheet sort of axon view. Or no, I guess it's a perspective. You can see that these are actually have vanishing points slightly. They're not quite parallel. And what you can see is that we basically just have a bunch of outlines for the space that we're working within right now. That's all we have. You'll see these two lines. This is level 1, and this is level 2. So that's the other thing. It'll annotate some of these, let's say, grids that we established both in the XY plane and in the YZ and XZ planes for sections and elevations. All right, so I'm talking a bit abstractly here. What I found is the most easy thing is to go to floor plans, right? And first of all, we have these markers. I'm just going to move these so they're not centered, because sometimes they get in the way of me trying to draw things. Okay, I'm just going to click on them, and then you can see I can click and drag them. All right. But this is the space we're going to be working within in plan. First things first, we're working within a specific site. We said that site was 144 feet deep and 44 feet wide, I believe, and then 60 feet tall. Right. Okay, so first things first is maybe instead of drawing a rectangle, what I'm going to do is I'm going to establish a grid, right? Again, when we think about how we design, you know, probably the most used ordering system is a grid, right? So if I think about 144, that's divisible by 12, it's divisible by 24. In fact, if we divide 144 by 24, we get 6. Let's say we have 6 modules of 24 feet. You know, then that actually could work well with just about any structural system, right? So spanning between columns, 24 feet each, that's an easy span to do. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just click grid. You'll see that this thing changes, and now we can start to draw grid lines. Okay. You'll see that each line is then labeled. So as I start to draw these, the first one's labeled 1. Now if I move over, I'm just sort of moving my mouse around. I'm not really clicking or anything. You can see that it's going to IntelliSense. Maybe I want to line this up with the previous column line that I drew, and then it'll start to dimension things. And it's trying to find some nice round whole numbers to use. So in this case, I just said I want 6 24-inch modules. So now I'm going to click, and I'm just going to move up and make another one. I'm just going to move over here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to establish what could be both a spatial and structural grid to work within. Something that we didn't do in Rhino originally with our parts, but now we can start to overlay a little more order. And in doing so, we make something that's a little more sophisticated, a little more complex, in that it's not only taking into consideration the spatial moves you're making between surfaces, but now starts to have a sort of modularity and even a structural logic baked in, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So if I have 7 grid lines, then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 modules in between, right? When I'm done, I can just hit the modify the cursor and get out of that tool. All right. Okay. And it seems kind of weird. I'm just gonna go back to grid again. I'm gonna do the same thing, but in the opposite direction, right? In the Y direction, or the X direction, sorry. And we said that our site is 44 feet wide along Las Vegas Boulevard. And so I'm just going to go ahead and establish grid line for the sort of northern boundary of our site. 44 is divisible by 2, so I would go 22 feet. If it's only giving me like 4-foot increments, maybe I just zoom in a little more and I can get more granular increments. In fact, the more I zoom in, the more control I have over things. 22 feet. All right. In building information modeling system like Revit, what's interesting about it is that it's inherently parametric in certain ways. So let me just move this down. Let's say I accidentally made this 23 and a half feet instead of 22 feet. I can always move this. And or I can always go here and change it and hit enter, right? And suddenly it's at the 22 feet from this one, okay? All right, so just so you know, there's lots of things you can do, and I'm moving pretty quickly, but all I did was really is just to sort of draw a grid with a set of lines, right? So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 modules, the east-west direction, 1, 2 modules, 2 modules in the north-south direction, right? And now let's say I go to the second floor plan. They're also show up in the second floor plan, right? If I look at this in the section view, you can see looking north from the south, right? The sort of south elevation view, I can see the relevant grid lines that pop up, right? If I, let's say, look at it from the east elevation, you can see the relevant grid lines pop up again, assuming that those carry through from level to level. All right, so again, as we make changes, what's really nice about this is that it's geared specifically towards the architecture industry. When I go to my 3D view, you can see the grid actually shows up here as well, right? Okay, I'm just going to leave it in the cover sheet 3D view. It's something that you can toggle back and forth between here. And once you open these up, all these tabs stay until you X them out. You can sort of toggle back and forth between them, okay? It's a really nice thing about this interface. I'm just going to leave it at the 3-dimensional view. And let's talk about the easiest workflow for importing Rhino geometry into Revit, because I did some things in Rhino. Let's bring it into Revit and see what we have. All right, make sense? Okay, so I'm going to go to File Pull Down. No, I'm not. That's silly. I'm not going to go to File Pull Down. Sorry. I'm going to make sure I'm in the Architecture tab over here. And what I want to do is I want to say components, and you can see that there's a little caret below components. There's several different ways you can do component. I'm going to say place a component. No, I'm going to say model in place. All right, sorry. So what I did, let me just clear that up. Components, pull down, model in place. When I click that, it gives me this box, and it says, okay, if you're going to make your own piece of geometry, you're going to model something, and you're not using one of these classes up here, what kind of class or family are you going to use, right? So it has a set of categories. So let's say you're going to work on something custom, but it's part of casework or ceilings, or maybe it has something to do with conduit fittings. Ooh, you can get down to the nitty gritty there. That's really hardcore nuts and bolts going conduit fittings. Geesh. Furniture, floors, etc. Right? But what I'm going to do, since I'm just bringing something in from Rhino or SketchUp, you can do the same thing from SketchUp. So I'm going to say generic model. I'm just going to hit OK. And it's going to ask me, well, do you want to name this object that you're bringing in generic model 1? I'm just going to hit OK. I don't really care. Okay. Now it's going to come up and it's going to give me these quick modeling tools. I find that the drawing and modeling tools in Revit are pretty lousy compared to Rhino. That's why I think there's an industry we love Rhino for like sweeping and extruding and things like that. But when it comes to like trying to make an architectural model that's complete and can be extracted into drawings, we like Revit. So going back and forth, I think, is a real currency here. It's going to say, are you finished modeling or do you want to cancel? So before I hit the green check mark or anything, I'm not going to use these modeling tools. Instead of modeling something new in Revit, I'm going to say insert. I'm going to say, let's import something from a different CAD platform. Import CAD. This is not incredibly obvious or intuitive the first time you do it. Practicing it, you start to remember these things. So anyway, let's see. This is already set to documents. I'm just going to go to desktop and I'm going to find, let's see. You can see here, these are the different file types I can bring in, I can import in CAD format wise. DWGs and DXFs, which are common AutoCAD file formats. We have SAT files, DGN, which is MicroStation. You like in Bentley products. We have OBJ, which is a common file format for bringing in meshes and things like that from Studio Max and Maya. We can do Rhino files and SketchUp files and STL files. STL stands for stereolithography. Those are the kind of files that you use, you usually produce for 3D printing. So I'm just going to select Rhino files. I'm going to find that 767 Axon Summer 2024. Go ahead and bring that in. All right, here it is. You've imported it in. You can see it's not quite in the same spot as my grid, right? And in fact, if I select it, let's see if I can just move it around. Ay, ay, ay. For some reason, it wants to, let's see, move. Here we go. Let's see if I can just move it around here a bit. All right, so you can see, I don't know if that's really to the right scale, or maybe it is, and my modules are just way off, right? But I think one of the things you can see is that you can be very precise, and then these things might actually line up when you bring them in. If not, you can move them around to line them up. Scale-wise, they should be the same. But for some reason, this looks a little off to me. So what I might do is actually just use this as a guide, a visual guide, in which case I might just move it out of the way slightly. Let's see if I can move that back and out of the way. Can always go back into plan and see where this thing's at. You can see when I look at it in second floor plan or first floor plan, it's only showing the things that it's cutting through and that are below that cutting plane. When I go to second floor, it's again doing the same thing, so I see different things each time. Let's see here. Just going to move this, but I'm going to make sure that it's out of the way. That's the key thing. Let me go to the cover sheet. And again, if I move this box around, I can begin to see three-dimensionally what I have here. All right. Okay. So once I'm done finally with this model, I can say finish model. All right, now this thing is in there and until I delete it, right? I can always click on it and delete it. So I might use this, I might not. I moved it off to the side so it doesn't conflict with my grid. Maybe I actually want to now try to rework the logic of this, but within this grid. I have a little more rules here when it comes to where things align or don't align. Let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 modules here. So, to me, that would be something I'd need to reconcile. Maybe I go with a 1 and then off, and then 1, 2, off, and 3, off. Or maybe I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe I just need to change the scale of these and make 6 of them or whatever, right? So that, to me, I think that's an interesting set of questions that you're suddenly confronted with. But let's look at section really quickly. You can see again that not only do we have a grid and plan, but we also have level 1 and level 2. And that we can actually start to make this grid three-dimensional. So if I'm in section, I go to architecture, right? When I'm in section or elevation, instead of using grid, I can actually use level. I can add another level to the model, right? So we go from here to here, that's only 12 feet. We said that we can go all the way up to 60 feet. Maybe that means that I have 4 levels that are 15 feet each, or 12 also divides into 60. It's 5 times, right? So 5 levels at 12 feet each. Maybe I'll just do 4 at 15 each, just to start off with. So one thing is I have level 2 and it's set to start at at 12 feet above level 1. I can double click on that dimension and change it, 15. Now it's going to move up to 15 feet above level 1. And you can see that it's locked, right? So if I move level 1, this will move along with it 15 feet up from it, right? So you can begin to build associations. In case you think you're going to start to modify things, you can always begin to build associations between grid lines, and then between walls and grid lines, between floors and in your section floors, etc., your levels. Okay. Let's build another level, modify levels. Let's see. Just gonna go to modify. Let's find, I'm in the architecture tab again. I'm gonna make another level. I'm gonna go from this one. I'm just gonna move up, and I'm gonna say it needs to be 15 feet, right? Oh, oof. It always draws the most counterintuitive way from what I think. Let's see. I'll move over here. 15 feet. Need to zoom in a little further to get 15. Here we go. And I will say that an Apple Magic Mouse is the worst kind of mouse to use in Revit. And unfortunately, that's what I'm stuck with at the moment. Till I get onto Amazon later this afternoon and have one shipped to me tomorrow. All right, so, and then again, I can go ahead and establish, like I said, a level 4 that's 15 feet above that one. Click. All right, so what have we done? We've just basically created a 3-dimensional grid. We've established all of those rules, but we've between where we're working within, right? But we've also established like a set of modules inside of that volume, right? So that 44 by 60 by 144 foot volume that we're working within. Now we have a little more granularity in here to start to sort of place things and try to create some alignments, right? Again, we can start to line up walls, columns, and things like that with a structural logic, a structural module, as well as a spatial logic. So things start to clearly work out, right? Like in other words, if you can shoot an arrow and hit multiple targets with one arrow, right? That's what we're always trying to do. That's clever architecting. So in this case, trying to sort of align both our spatial modules and our structural modules, and along with our site dimensions. I mean, that's like 101, right? Okay, great. So you can see now I'm going back and forth. I'm just going through the tabs. There's my floor plan 1, floor plan 2. I should have more now. I should have, right, as I added levels, now I have level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, because I added those levels in my section or elevation views. As I toggle back and forth between them, right? You can see an elevation. There's that elevation of that thing I just brought in from Rhino. You can see the different levels that I have, right? Not sure why these are. Let me just undo that, but I just wanted to sort of slide it over, but for some reason, anyway, I don't really necessarily care if it's not showing up, like if it's staggered like that. Yeah. It easily covers the site that I'm working within, which is down here, right? Okay. Now, really quickly, if I wanted to sort of start to model certain things in Revit, right? I typically start up here in the architecture tab, and I ask myself, am I doing like a floor? Am I doing wall, etc., right? So let's say I'm going to do a wall. Okay. Now, the key thing about this is that the intellectual exercise of establishing a grid and different levels where we need them becomes really important when we start to insert floors and walls. Because every time we insert a floor, it's going to ask what level is the floor on, right? And then every time we do a wall, it's going to ask which level does the wall start and at which level does the wall end, okay? And so it's something to keep in mind, right? And it's again, you have less freedom than you do when you're just sort of modeling things in Rhino. But at the same time, you have the sort of logic of this grid that you can work within that can be very handy, right? So again, that's why I sort of find that, when I need freedom, and I'm doing things quickly. I work in Rhino really well. Then when I want to sort of instill a sort of sense of discipline, let's say modularity, or very specific dimensions, into them, then Revit becomes a really nice sort of post-production or next step, right? Let's put it that way, next step. All right. So if I start a wall, first of all, it's going to ask me if I'm doing an architectural wall or structural wall. I'm just going to say architectural wall. All right. And now I can start to snap or move along these lines and try to identify places in space. Let's say I'm going to make a wall from here to here. When I'm done, I can hit enter, I can hit modify, I can right click and say cancel. Or I can keep going, right? Let's say I'm going to make walls that look like this. Okay. You can see nicely that it just made a wall and plan. And then I closed up that corner, and so it's assuming a few things when we make these walls. Let me just delete. I'll select and delete this first wall that I made. Go back to walls. I'll just start making a couple of walls really quickly. Oh, architecture, wall, architectural. Snap, snap, snap. Right click, cancel. And I'll do it one more time over here. Repeat. Oh, come on. I need to set my browser, my mouse settings a little better to repeat last command and accept when I hit this instead of getting this sort of menu. All right. So you can see that I have walls in plan, right? The walls have a certain thickness. How thick are they? If I select them and I make sure that I go into properties, right? You can see that by default, it made a basic wall generic 8 inches thick. All right. You can see that there's different sort of families of wall, or sorry, different types of walls here in the wall family, right? So you can see that I could call it concrete wall and make it certain thicknesses. Or I could say it's exterior, brick and CMUs, etc. Right? There's more information here than you can shake a stick at. Let's keep it generic, and let's say generic 12 inches. You can see that when I just had this wall selected, it just changed this one to 12 inches. I can go back over here, change this one to 12. And since I modeled it along those center lines, it's let's say offsetting from those center lines each time, right? Let's see, generic 12 inch, right? But you can see that it's closing up all the walls and keeping them closed for us, even as we change the geometric properties of the walls, okay? And again, very, very nice, handy, quick thing that Revit's very good at, right? And sometimes these things change, right? You change the structural system, or you change the wall system, or you're evaluating different cladding solutions for the exterior, or different needs or requirements for interior partitions. Or you get more information from, let's say, a mechanical engineer or from a structural engineer. Maybe she gives you some information that says, well, these walls actually need to be a little thicker, because we're gonna put some structural framing in there, right? So suddenly you go, oh, now I have to redraw it. No, you can come back here and start to modify its properties. Okay. So instead of having to sort of erase and delete and things like that, these things are inherently parametric, so you can go back and continue to make changes as you go. Now we're looking at it in plan. Let's look at it three-dimensionally. Let's go back to that three-dimensional view. You can see that the wall goes from here to here, right? Now, why does it do that? Let's select the wall. Let's take a look at more properties of the wall. So it says location line is along the wall center line. And it says base constraint. Right now it starts at the base at level 1. The top constraint says unconnected and just go up 20 feet. Or we could say, let's have it go up to level 2 and hit apply. Right now you can see that it's stopping at level 2. Or we could say, let's have it go all the way up to level 3 and hit apply. Now it does all the way up to level 3. We can go ahead and do this. When we were modeling originally, we could have set this and then started to draw, and these things would have automatically gone from level 1 to level 3. But, again, after the fact, we can always go in and start to modify these things. All right. let's say this wall starts at level 1 and goes up to level 3, but this one starts at level 2 and goes up to level 3. Of course, we can always change that. We can say the base of this one's going to be level 2 up to level 3, right? And it's going to go ahead and modify these things for us, right? So again, it's doesn't lend itself to like doing lots of interesting creative things right off the bat. But once you sort of have some of these constraints really spelled out, it can be really useful to sort of get some precision, right? Oops, I accidentally selected the wrong thing there. Okay, there we go. Level 1, 2, let's call this level 3. We'll put this up to level 3. And we'll put this one up to level 3. I hate the magic mouse in Revit. All right. It's even worse though if you're just trying to use your touchpad. So these are things that we can go over again and again, but I did want to demonstrate these things for you in case you wanted to work ahead, because next week we're going to start to model things more seriously in Revit. And so this will get us started. This will whet anybody's appetite if they want to work ahead. But the key thing is that you're getting these axons in Rhino, and you're able to submit them by Thursday. We can take a closer look at them on Thursday and talk about them. And again, we can do more Revit demonstrations if we want to. Just as I entered in walls, again, I did that by using the architecture tab and finding walls. If I bring in something from Rhino and I want to, let's say I want to make a surface into a wall, a Rhino surface into a Revit wall, I can go wall from face, and then I could try to select one of these faces. Highlighted walls overlap. One of them may be ignored when Revit. Oh, okay. Yeah, I see. Oh, it's because I selected the wrong face. Use cut geometry to bed. Okay. That was goofy. I think I selected the wrong thing. Now, let me try this one more time. So for instance, if I had, let's say this face, right? Or one of these faces, let's say I want to build a wall off of it. Again, architecture, wall. Instead of saying wall architectural, I can say wall by face. And I could select one of these faces. You can see, hopefully you can see that this front face is blue, highlighted blue, meaning I've selected it and that I've made, you can see that it's made this 8-inch wall inside my other geometry from Rhino, right? And so you can see now that I've made a wall on both faces, and so now they're actually intersecting each other stupidly, right? I don't know why I did that. Here's another way you can do this, right? We talked about walls. Let's do floors. Floor architectural, or actually first, hold on, let me go back. Floor. Let me hit enter. Oh, what is this doing? Stop. Oh, sorry. It wanted me to modify create floor boundary still. So let me go back here and cancel this. But for some reason, man, Revit is really modify. I'm not sure what happened here. Select, modify. Somehow I like hid part of my interface, which I might need to fix. Okay, here we go. Not sure why that did that. Sure, modify create floor boundary. It's still saying I'm in the modify create. I gotta exit out of that. Sorry. Let's say I do floor and I do by face. I can again select, let's say this face, select multiple. Let's see. Well, let me select this or not. Not sure why it's not letting me select a face. Select multiple. Clear selection. Creates elements from selected mass faces. I don't know why this is not letting me select. Select multiple. See if I drag if it does it. Huh. Well, it's not letting me do that. All right. Never mind then. I'm sure there's a reason why it's not letting me do that. And as is most often the case, it's usually user error, place 4 by face. But it's not letting me actually select a face. I don't know why why it's doing something goofy here and why I can't exit out of it either. Okay, I just hit an exit, or sorry, escape key. Anyway, I could start to draw floors, right? Um, and again, it's asking me, well, what level do you want it? How thick is it going to be? And do you want to offset it, right? So, you can also offset things here and there from different levels. But again, I can do a boundary line. I can start to draw and create walls, or sorry, floors from the inside or next to walls. When I'm done, I can hit OK, right? When I go to my cover sheet view, you can see that I have a floor. It's 12 inches thick. It's a 12-inch thick slab, starts at level 1 and goes 12 inches down to the ground. Okay. So the level is always going to be where that finished face is of the floor, and then it's going to depth and goes down in Z from there, right? So I could always begin to sort of create different floors and things like that, right? So that's how we can start to model in Revit. And again, I don't expect anybody to sort of pick this up and do it right away if you're not experienced at all with Revit. But I did just want to sort of whet your appetite. And then again, get a recording on online for you as well, so that you could you can use it to, if you want to work ahead a little bit here, or start playing around in Revit more. All right. I'm going to go ahead and maybe I'll just save this really quickly. Why not? I'll call this 767 demo 01. Save it to my desktop there. All right. The next time I open this up, I'll have the same file here, in any geometry that I've imported, any geometry that I've made or modeled. Okay. As you can see, you can toggle back and forth between different viewports or really drawing types with this project browser. Once you have these things open, you can leave them up, or you can always close them if you don't want to see the section, or maybe you don't want to see the north elevation, but you want to see the east elevation, etc. There's nothing stopping you from going back and forth. And again, in each of these, they lend themselves to different things. I can always change. Let's see where level 4 is if I wanted to. I could be very precise and enter in a value, right? Give it that precise elevation, projected up from the finished floor or grade. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and close. You want to save changes? Yeah, sure, why not? All right. So that's a very, very quick primer and some of the very first steps that I find are really helpful in sort of setting up a project in Revit. Again, I think making sure you have your units set correctly, import anything that you need in from SketchUp or Rhino, you can do that. You can bring in native Rhino files, native SketchUp files right in. And establishing a grid, I think, is really important, right? If you can, again, otherwise you're just drawing random things, right? So that grid becomes really handy. And this assignment's set up to use that grid. So definitely do that. Think about, just as I could have taken 144 and divided it by 24, I could have divided it by 12 and gotten smaller modules. But again, I was thinking about, let's say, a steel module. It's really easy to span 24 feet in one direction with steel, 22 feet in the other direction with steel. Same with concrete frame. In fact, it's kind of small, depending on what you're trying to do. But yeah, that's an easy span to make. 12 seems a bit really small when it comes to structural logic, but needless to say, there's lots of different ways. I didn't even touch on columns. And we'll talk a little more about structures in Studio, but as we go. But you can actually add columns, and then it actually builds the wall around the columns as wall enclosures and things like that. And it does this pretty much automatically. Okay, so that's another nice thing about Revit. It's constantly making assumptions. That can be both a great thing and also a really frustrating thing when you want to do something that's a little outside the box. It becomes a question of how do you trick Rhino or Revit into doing it. So that's why I find that sometimes it's easier to do something in Rhino than bring it into Revit, right? Other times, I'll just set things up in Revit and go to town. Okay. All right. Are there any quick questions about that? Okay, if not, what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit out of, I'm going to leave Zoom. I'm going to make one of you the host and exit and come right back in so that it'll process that video. I want to get that video processing so I can get it uploaded as soon as possible. Okay. So let me stop sharing. And Kayla, don't go anywhere because I'm going to make you the host. And I'll be right back. I'm just going to leave
Okay.
Zoom and I'll be right back. But that will, when I get back, I can coordinate a few things. It'll be work time. I can coordinate a few things with Kayla to get her on board. I can look at that one video that's not showing up for some reason, is not public, and fix that because I don't know what's going on, and do anything else along with maybe doing any housekeeping or answering any questions or troubleshooting anything that we need. So I'll be right back. See you in just a minute.